Well, Victor, thanks for sitting down to chat with me. We met, I think it was a year and a half ago, at this event that Excel was doing, these shared investors that we have. And I've always just been really impressed with you as a founder and with what you guys are doing at Synthesia. So can you give a quick elevator pitch on Synthesia, the product, what it can do?
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having me. I think Synthesia we're the world's premier AI video platform, and at its core, we help our customers communicate their messages in the most efficient and engaging way possible. And it's pretty clear, I think to most of us that in 2024, that's not text or slide decks, that's video and audio. So we provide one platform where you can create videos without having to use cameras. So for the creation step, we have all of our AI models, AI avatars, kind of like the technology I think that we're most well known for. We have AI voices, we have a full video editor. That's all packaged in a nice, modern, collaborative platform. So you can write with your colleagues, work with them, leave comments. We can share the content with your audience. So we provide, of course, like a video player, but also a video player that's been optimized specifically to work with AI-generated videos. So for example, our video player supports multiple languages and a bunch of other things. And we work with companies from like all sizes. We work with some of the world's biggest companies. We work with some of the world's smallest companies, work with individual creators. But really the core of everything we do is we help you deliver your message in the most engaging format possible.
And you guys started the company, was it 2017 or 2018?
2017.
2017. Yeah. I actually went this morning back onto the Wayback Machine on Internet Archive. Have you ever done that before?
Yeah.
And what I think is amazing is like your guys' hero copy is like pretty much the same back in 2018. Yeah. And I was surprised because I would have expected maybe you started in a different direction, you kind of found your way to the avatar generation, the video generation, but it seems like that has always been the vision from when you started the company, even, what is it, 7, 8 years ago now?
In some senses, yes. I think the vision hasn't changed. I think we had to figure out like how to sequence our way to get to where we are today and where we want to go in the future, right? So it really started, I mean, we did what I think most VCs would tell you not to do, is that we fell in love with the technology. Back in 2017, when I met my co-founder, Matthias Niesner, who'd done the research paper called Face to Face, which we kind of in spirit at least originate from. What we both got excited about was that even though the technology at that point was like very, very immature, it's very, very early, we felt like in 10 years, you're gonna be able to make a Hollywood film from your laptop without needing anything else in your imagination, which in one hand is like a kind of a crazy idea, I think, to most people. On the other hand, like if you take the written word, everyone today can with their computer write a book and publish it without needing more than imagination. And we don't think of that as something special today because we all grew up in the age of computers, but that is actually very special in the history of the world. And for us, it felt like this is going to be the next big thing. It's going to change everything we know about media production. And that idea was kind of thrown falling to us that we felt like, okay, let's try to start a company to build kind of like towards that. Not necessarily because we wanted to make like Hollywood films, but like the technology is going to be so powerful, you're going to be able to do these things, right? And back in, I forgot what year it was, but a couple of years before we founded the company, Sony got hacked and all their internal emails got kind of put on the internet. And as we were raising the round, we had this like list of funds, of course, and every single fund turned us down. Generative AI wasn't really that hot back then. Then we had a list of like, business angels, individuals that we felt would like potentially be interested. And Mark fit pretty well in that Venn diagram of like media and technology.
Yeah.
But getting in touch with him is obviously difficult, and we were sitting like in London, have no connection to him. But then we downloaded this hack because my co-founder Stefan thought maybe his email was going to be in there, and his email wasn't there. And then we sent him an email, and he replied back within 4 minutes saying that he thought this was pretty interesting, sent us some questions, and we replied back to those questions, and he sent some more questions. And we did this for 12, 13 hours, I think.
Oh my God.
Until like 4 a.m. in the morning, UK time, where he said that he'd put $1 million in, given that diligence checked through. So we never went on the phone with him.
You never talked live?
We never talked live. And I think the lesson that we learned there, I think, is that we were basically going out to the market and we were saying, hey, this crazy thing's gonna happen, like, with the vision and the thesis, essentially.
Yeah.
And we had to start from scratch. Like, everyone was like, it sounded batshit crazy at the time. It wasn't like the current thing. I think it is like when you're so much maybe ahead of like the market, you really need to find those like missionaries who already share your view of the world, right?
Yeah.
And they are out there, it's just about finding them. And for us, it definitely turned out to not be like London-based VC firms where everyone who worked there like used to do private equity, right? Like that's not the right type of investor for that type of play. So.
Right. So Fast forward to I guess a few years. Do you feel like there was an inflection point with either the product or the market or the company, like a single inflection point you can kind of point to? Because, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think you guys were on this like linear growth story from 2017 to now.
For sure not.
You know, just from our conversations, like it's really exploded over the last 2 years. Can you point to one or two things that you feel like changed that got you on this track that you're on now?
Yeah, so I mean, the big unlock was in 2020. Basically, when we got the first round of funding, right? We sat in a room and we're like, okay, this round was not very easy to close. Yeah. We probably should treat this $1 million as like the only lifeline we have to prove that we can get to the next stage. And so as much as we thought it was very cool with like, you know, this Hollywood films and laptops and like that whole vision, we're also, you know, very realistic that, I mean, the technologies are nowhere near there. It's not even worth starting to build that. So what can be the first step towards that vision that we think we can feasibly both build and sell, right? And so the first thing we kind of began building was basically AI dubbing, which was the idea of like not like we do today, predominantly like generate entirely new video, but take your existing video shot with a camera and translate that to a different language. The way we do that is that we take that video, we'd replace the voiceover, and we'd reanimate the facial expressions to fit that new language. And we managed to build that, and we took it to market. We took it to all of the existing video industries, so think like agencies, production companies, basically anyone who's like already working with video. That felt like the most natural place to take a technology like this, right?
Yeah.
And we had like mild success. We did like almost $1 million in revenue, I think, in like 18 months, which for like a 10-person team was a significant lifeline for us.
Yeah.
But it became very clear to us very quickly that as much as it was very cool, it wasn't the path to build a really big company, because ultimately, because it was a vitamin, not a painkiller, right? The technology was so immature that it like took 2 PhDs, 2 weeks to create like a 30-second clip, right? So we did like David Beckham and Snoop Dogg and Lionel Messi and some of these big celebrities, and those were like, you know, fantastic projects for us to do as a company, but they were not like a great business necessarily. And it only worked if you look directly at the camera at all times, right? Yeah. There were so many constraints around it, and ultimately I think what we figured was like all these people who are already making video, they're not that interested in this new kind of tech. For them it's like, yeah, it's cool, but if we disappeared the week after, it, you know, it would be like, we'll translate the videos the way we've always done it. But what we learned in that period was, because we just went out and talked to everyone we could about video, was that actually there are like millions, maybe even billions of people in the world who are desperate to make video today, but they cannot make video. They aren't making video today. And those are not people who work in cool agencies or production companies. They work in like a big bank, like a smaller company. They're individual creators. And what these people were telling us was that we would love to make video. We would really, really love to make video, because I have this important message that I want to share with my sales team or my executive team, whatever. And I know that if I delivered as video, it'd be so much more effective, but I can't get the budget. I don't know how to operate a camera. And so I'm left with like sending slide number 2,600 to these people, and it's just not working. And so the thesis kind of shifted from let's build tools for the video industry to saying, what if we can build a way to make video which is 1,000 times easier and 1,000 times more affordable than running around with a camera, which is very unscalable for most people. And so that is what turned it on to this, you know, avatar idea, SaaS platform, super easy to do self-service. And that launched in 2020. And that was the inflection point of the company, where I think I've been involved in like lots of startups over the years, and it was like holy shit, there's something here.
Yeah.
Right? The product like barely worked. The videos were like really crappy. The voices were crappy. It was like barely working. Yet we had like a lot of people saying, hey, this is like doing something for me.
Because you guys have continued to grow a lot, how much do you think that is due to the technology has just gotten like a lot better versus the market around you has just matured? More and more people have seen the benefit of the technology, even with the existing limitations, and so they're more like ready to try it and adopt it. How do you think about those two?
100% both, right? I think like if you look at the technological progress, if you look at, I mean, just the avatars today and the process of creating your own avatar, so much faster and better than it was when we started out. And the fidelity of the avatars also, you know, much higher, and we're about to launch some new models pretty soon. It's going to be even better. I think on the quality of the avatars, or fidelity of them, right? It's like, given how fast we're growing now and how many use cases there is for like this level of quality.
Right.
When I look at what we're doing today, I'm like, we're like 10% into the roadmap.
You spoke a lot about the matching like quality with use cases. Mm-hmm. You know, back then it was, okay, this specific type of buyer, this specific type of use case, the quality we think we can deliver will like meet their needs. Are you finding now, because you guys just launched Synthesia 2.0, right? Improved avatars, you can more easily create your own avatar. You said you have more model improvements coming. How are you figuring out like what the new use cases are that you guys are able to support as the technology is getting better?
So there's two vectors on the technology. It's like the pure avatar quality, and then there's like all the platform we build around it. One thing that's also very important to me and to the team is that yes, the avatar models are very important at the core of our product for sure, but like the platform is so much more than that. And the reason our customers love us is because of the avatar models, but it's also because all the additional workflow and edits that we've built around it. I think ultimately we're at a scale now, right, where we can let the users tell us. The beautiful thing is like we launched Express One, which is our first emotional avatars, and we can just see like people come to us and say like, hey, actually now I want to do like more product marketing, I want to do more like external facing content, as opposed to some of these more internal facing content. I think the really big way of thinking about this is like, if you think of where we are now, I think we're great for instructional content, but not storytelling content yet.
Yeah.
Instructional content to me is like, it's very practical, it's utilitarian, it's not about like you connecting with the avatar or like laughing at a joke, or it's just like, you know, you're teaching a developer how to make the best use of Assembly AI APIs. And for the developer, that's his or her preferred method of ingesting that information.
Yeah.
And that's great. But it's not because they're like, wow, this avatar is the most funny. It's not, you know?
Yeah.
I think what we've learned over the years, one of the, I think, most profound insights that we've had is this thing that most people really don't like to be on camera. They don't like watching themselves on camera. They like listening to their own voice. And that's very true in the a bit more, you know, like business-centric enterprise use case, where like a lot of our customers like, well, people don't want to make screen recordings of themselves, even down to that. They don't want to be on camera. Like they don't like to do it, and they're not good at it. It takes a very long time to film because you have to do it 10 different times.
You mess up, you have to restart. Yeah.
Exactly. But there's also what we've seen, a lot of people who want to create like, you know, awesome content online, but they're not comfortable sharing their face, either just because they don't want to, because they don't want to be like a famous person.
Right.
But they have a lot of potential to create really cool content, right? Of course, we've seen this like somewhat play out with like faceless YouTube channels and TikTok and Instagram. But I think ultimately what it enables, right, is that the best ideas can win. Like if you're a great content creator, it doesn't matter how you look. I have a Danish accent, right? Like, I don't know if that's good or bad if I wanted to become a TikTok influencer, but it has some impact on how I would be as an influencer, right? And so you can take out a lot of those things, and people who don't, in business context, don't want to have an accent, for example.
Right.
So it is going to create this like a lot of like artificial content, and it's going to be weird, but I think it's ultimately I think that it's going to unlock creativity in a way that we can't really fathom yet.
What do you think are the differences in running an AI company versus running a just like traditional SaaS or just any traditional type of tech company? We could sit here and talk for hours about where the technology might be in 5 years and 10 years. The timelines there are unknown, the impacts are unknown. The reality though, today, you guys are delivering value for crazy amount of customers. There's a ton of use cases where the technology is good enough today and it's getting better. That's unlocking more use cases. What do you think are the differences between running an AI company, AI first, like AI native company, and then traditional SaaS company?
I think it presents a lot of like interesting strategic questions that I feel like we're running an AI company, right, as opposed to running a SaaS company. Like, where in the stack do you play, right? Are you building true foundational models? Do you take true foundational models that's open source and make them your own through lots of intensive, heavy R&D? Do you just use APIs, or like wherever on that stack you kind of sit? I think you have to be intentional about that, but also accept that it can change over time, right? So when we started the company, I mean, there were nothing, right? There was like literally nothing to go from. We had to build everything ourselves, from like the facial landmark detections, for example, which was like a big important part of like the first iteration of the technology. Now in a world where like there's so much stuff that's happening online, we're shifting to all these like generalizable models. A lot more people are just thinking about AI video, experimenting with AI video. And so I think a lot of like the hard questions that you face is this thing of like, when do you chase the shiny new thing, right? Where like, okay, clearly this is going to be the future of the space, but you just like jump ship to this now. When do you kind of hold your guns? And I think we've definitely made mistakes in both ways, but sometimes we've been too eager and sometimes we've been too conservative. And because there's so much uncertainty with these things, right? I think that's like a bit different in SaaS, where I think if you're building a fintech company, like if you can imagine it, you can probably build it. And that's not to talk that down, but for something like this, right, it's like I want to make videos of two avatars sitting in a chair like we are right now and be able to fist bump, right? Like, yes, that's going to be possible someday, but there's a lot of fog of war in terms of like how exactly do we get there?
Right.
Whereas if it's like a fintech thing where like we want to support crypto, there's another set of objectives, but you can lay them out a lot easier, which means you can plan for it better and probably also means you can execute on it faster.
Right.
I think also like, what is the primary value driver and why is your company valuable? I think, you know, when we started out, like the first couple of years, probably most of the value for us was like the models we built, right? The technology in itself. And I think where we are now as a company is that the AI models are definitely a big and a very important part of like our value as a company, but we've built so much stuff outside of it, right? All the boring stuff like permissioning,
right.
being ISO 42100 compliant, like the publishing platform, like all these other things together, they are very valuable because we've built the workflows, right? And I think some companies will I think for a lot of companies the value will be in the models, and that's the right thing to do. And then you need to make sure you're really, really winning on the models because that's what you're betting your company on. I think for some like us, I think probably the value of the models should decrease over time, right? And that's not because we don't want to do like very deep research, but we're building the company in a way where the value should accrue from the totality of the platform, not just from the models itself.
So how do you then, as the founder, CEO, think about updating your mental model on where in your stack you think is strategic for you to actually invest, do it in-house rather, versus, okay, let's use an API or let's bring something in open source or partner? Like, how do you just think about what to invest in and then what is strategic for you to do yourself versus just like partner?
So I mean, first of all, being surrounded by like an amazing team of people who are much smarter than myself and who actually, you know, are in the code and in the models themselves is very important. Like, I'm not a technical founder, just to make that very clear. I think the other part of it is really in some sense elevating to like a business strategy question. What do we want to be uniquely good at Synthesia? And what does that mean downstream for all the modeling that we need to do, right? Well, you could say that means we need to have the world's best voice model specifically for videos of human presenters talking to the camera. And so with a video model, maybe with a video editing model that sits again. And the combination of all these models are the thing that we think makes us unique, right?
Yeah.
Where does that sit in the space of like what a lot of people are doing? And for me, when I think of like the video space right now, of course, what we've seen a lot of the last couple of years is like Zora, Runway, Pika, all these companies doing like amazing work on, but I think most people think of it like text to video, right? Mm-hmm. And so when I look at a space like ours, I look at them and I think, you know, what they're doing is like they're starting at the point of like complete creativity, completely free form, type anything you want, they'll spit something out, which is really cool. But the trade-off is that it's very low degree of controllability. Mm-hmm. It's not very robust, right? It's very unstable. And those properties work really well for someone who's like a creative person, right? You don't mind doing like 10 prompts to get to like a really cool clip you never would have gotten to otherwise.
Yeah, it's almost like part of the creative process.
Exactly, yeah. Right? It is like you go back and forth with the computer and it's really awesome. The problem is if you're sitting in an office somewhere and your boss is asking you to create a video about like how to make sure you're staying safe in the local warehouse, that model does not work, right? Mm-hmm. So what we're doing is we're starting at the point of like complete control, stability, robustness, and so on, right? Every time you go into Synthesia, it's always the same avatar, no matter what time of the day that you generate a video with it. It's always the same voice. It always generates, and you're not going to run into all these sort of issues that you have with these bigger models, right?
Yeah.
Now the trade-off for us is that the technology is less creative, it's less freeform, it's kind of more constrained and more structured in a way. But I think what's happening, right, is that we're building towards more freeform, more creativity. I think a lot of this technology will eventually converge at the base level, and it'll be the expression of the product that matter in terms of what company that you're building, right? So for us, I mean, we're building for an audience of people who used to make PowerPoints and now they're making videos.
Right.
And that's very different to building to someone who may be like a film director or creative director who's always had to rely on like real physical cameras to bring the ideas to life, and now they can do it from behind their computer, right? It's very different incentives, it's very different pricing models probably, it's very different asks for the customers to the company, right? And I think that's the thing I think you have to be pretty kind of cognizant
like
about.
Who you're building this for.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like, you know, you said the PowerPoint to video, like that's your core audience right now. A lot of times in the conversations in the AI market, it is so focused on the technology. Okay, where's it going to go in the next year, in the next 5 years? And I think that is fun conversation to have. Yeah. But what I don't think people talk about enough is like, well, who's your core? Like, who are you building this for? And who's your core customer? And like, who's the product designed for? Because you can create a lot of differentiation once that's clear. Exactly. And a lot of that isn't necessarily always on the technology level. I mean, you spoke about like the permissions. There's crazy amounts of collaboration features in Synthesia that probably wouldn't exist if you were focusing on influencers as your core audience, I imagine.
100% right. And that's why it's so powerful when you anchor yourself to your customer. They hopefully will give you a good idea of like what the correct roadmap is. And oftentimes, right, as you said, it's not just the model performance. It's a lot more than that. And I think in many ways, many customers, no matter if you're using assembly or if they're using Synthesia, right, like a 5% increase in model quality, of course everyone will take it. But let's say that someone comes out with like a slightly better transcription model, but you've actually built the entire workflows for that company. It integrates their translation systems and like whatever things that they've been building with you guys. It's a beautiful API. It gives the right error codes back when things are not working. Like those are the things that really matter in production, right? And I think it's also why, unless you really want to be like just a pure model company, of which I think there will be
like general purpose.
I think there will be very few there, and I think in the LLM space, it feels pretty obvious who those are going to be. Then you need to build specialization on whatever use case it is. And that is a lot of the value, I think, that you can deliver to your customers.
Right now, there's a ton of incumbent tech products on the market that are trying to pull AI into their product to either become AI native or build AI-powered features. It seems like a lot of them are maybe just starting with like, okay, let's just plug some AI features in and learn and see. What's advice you have for either product leaders or engineering leaders or early startup founders on how they can try to find where to focus and not just on like the general technology application, but like actual core customers or use cases so that they can build all that product on top of these models or in addition to these models where there can be a lot of differentiation?
I think you have to be driven by like a deep curiosity first and foremost, right? Of like really exploring like the problem space. I think you have to look for those like 10x improvements. It has to be like a step change.
For the end user.
For the end user, right? In terms of whatever metric that you're messing on, in terms of like cost or ease of use or whatever. And I think that's exactly kind of our story, right? Like we went to all these video companies, this is kind of like marginally interesting to them.
Yeah.
But then we found out that actually there's this like whole group of people who you would never have thought of going to talk to about a video product that had this kind of insight. And we heard that enough times to feel like, okay, there's like actually something there. Yeah. And it's very, very critical, right? Because had we not been very open-minded, and I think, just really try to build like a first principles understanding of video, we would probably have ended up building a super complex visual effects pipeline tool for making these AI video translations. There's a book called The Mom Test that, I don't know if you've read it, but it talks about like how to interview potential users of your product. And it's called The Mom Test because anything you say to your mom should say it's a good idea, right? And so what you want to try and get out of people is like not the mom answer, but the actual answer.
Yeah.
I think that book was always the one we referenced a lot in like the early days of really trying to build that first principles understanding of.
So you guys are growing a lot, making a lot of noise. Now there's competition that's entering the space. How do you think about maintaining your competitive edge? Is it the technology? Is it how everything's packaged together? Is it like a focus on core user segments that you think are different from competitors? What's your perspective there? And really with the framing of like advice for, all right, people have found that 10x capability, they're building, their product's doing well, and then they start to see that competition in the space, especially as the technology is getting more and more democratized. So people can launch competitive products potentially more easily than they could a year ago. How do you think about that?
So, I mean, it's definitely interesting because like it's way easier to copy than invent, right? And I mean, we're seeing that, like, we have a lot of companies copying us like one-to-one, like, they've like literally copied our API documentation and like all of our blog posts and like, and I think that's like, I mean, that's a fact of life. It's gonna happen, right? That's like capitalism is brutal, right? Any competitive advantage just gets competed away in a split second. I think it's also in some sense we had like the market for ourselves for 2 years, which was great for us in many ways, but also there's like nothing to like bounce up against. And so that way I think like look at your competitors and like see what are they doing well, right? They're probably doing something well if they're growing fast at least. I think there are two sides of this question. There's one is like on the pure AI side, and then there's one on the more product. On the AI side, I think it's very clear to me that AI moves in these like step changes. You want to make sure that you're like progressing along with those, and of course if you can, be one of the first ones to utilize one of these like new step changes in the technology, right? It doesn't need to be that you invent it, but if you have a specific use case like we have, that you're the first one to like put that out to market. And one thing I see a lot in the AI world right now is that because AI is such a captivating thing for like the mainstream audience, because it's so visceral, it's usually interactive, you can play around with it. It's like there are these moments. There's like the first company that does X, the first company that does Y, the first company that does C. It doesn't mean that if you build the same thing after that is like has no value, but there are these huge like viral waves you can catch if you're the first one to do something really crazy. But then of course when it comes to the actual product, I think it's also very unforgiving in the sense that as soon as you come up with something that's a lot better, everything else before it looks really shit. On our product side, I think it's about building for specific use cases, right? So you figure out that people love to use your product in a sales context. Okay, great, let's build a workflow for that. Or people love using it in a lead context, let's build a workflow for that. But ultimately, I mean, an AI business is a business like any other business. AI business right now, you get crazy multiples, you get all the hype because it's not a well understood market. But the better understood a market is, I think, the more you kind of, from a multiple perspective, revert back to what a good business looks like, which is like free cash flow.
There's a lot of talk about tech startups, AI within Europe, within the EU. How do you think the EU can foster more innovation so that there are more startups taking those moonshots? I mean, you're from Denmark, you live in London. A lot of the startup community right now, the EU community is talking about like competitiveness in the EU. How do you think about that as an EU founder?
I mean, I think it is unfortunately still way easier to build a great company in the US. I have zero doubts about that. It's where the capital is, it's where a lot of the talent is. Just the ambition, the mindset is different than it is in Europe, right? I think especially like mainland Europe, as in like the EU, or right now, I mean, being from Denmark, right? And I'm very, very worried. I think regulation, politics, talk. I mean, Europe has all the AI regulations in the world now and none of the AI companies, right? Which is, I mean, just mind-blowing. I think the UK has a really good opportunity to become a very, very important power in the global AI race. But I also think that there's some quick fixes for sure, like regulation, taxes, how we employee options, and like a lot of like practical things that for sure can change. But I also think that there is this like diffuse cultural mindset thing, right? Where in the US, I think people encourage you to think big, take a crazy bet, and not just in words, but also investors, like if you have a convincing, compelling vision and idea.
The risk appetite's there.
The risk appetite is there, right? And I think we had such a difficult time raising the first round. I'm pretty sure that we've been on the West Coast, it would have been 10 times easier, right?
Yeah.
And we powered through, and actually happy that we're still based in Europe. I want to build a company that's based in Europe and become like one of the global dominant players. But the only round we've raised with a lead investor in Europe is our Series C, right? Like every other round up until then has been led by American funds and American investors.
Yeah.
And that's probably because at the Series C, now we're a business and you can understand our business through the lens of like a spreadsheet and numbers and we're growth stage. But that also always makes me a bit sad that we've always had to go to the go to the US, right, and find investors.
A lot of companies, whether they're incumbents or just starting now, there's tons of founders starting new companies right now. There are tons of startups being built. Is there like one piece of advice you think you'd pass off to all those new product leaders, founders that are just starting right now that you feel like you've really learned over the last 18 months, 2 years, especially as it's just gotten like so much crazier?
I think it's a huge generalization, but I think if it's obvious, it's too late in many ways. There's of course great business that can be built in just like much better execution. But I think if you really are like a technology company, that's what you want to be, then I mean, I think for example, like, I wouldn't start an LLM company tomorrow. I think the race is off and that you really have to to feel very confident you have something that's like fundamentally new, right? But I think it's just like hype is a great tool and it's very powerful in terms of like the go-to-market motion and the growth motion. But focus on utility, not on novelty, is what we usually say in Synthesia. And I think that has generally been like a pretty good North Star for us, to not get too caught up in the hype and remember that no matter how cool your product is, at some point in your journey, right, you need someone in a procurement department to review the business value that you're bringing and say, okay, that makes sense to pay for. You can get away with a lot in these hype cycles. There will be a lot less scrutiny, but at some point, like, if you're not actually delivering value, you're gonna...
Yeah, the good hype to capture then because I like that utility over hype, is you want to capture the hype around first to some amazing new utility that you're bringing to market.
When you're trying to do something crazy, or like really big or very interesting, the people who talk to you are very different than if you're building like a payroll company.
Yeah.
Right. And we felt that firsthand. So we've gone through all these like hype cycles, also before the Gen AI moment, where you can actually knock the door down to like executives in really big companies because they find what you're doing interesting, maybe even on a personal level. And that's so valuable because you can get in, you can really understand how they work, how they think, how they think about their businesses and what they want to improve in a way that's difficult if you're doing something that's maybe less exciting in a way. Especially like, I mean, back then we were like 27, 28 years old, right? So it was very difficult for us to kick in the door to some of these people. And I'm very grateful for a lot of those people taking the time to chat to us in the early days.
Yeah, for sure.
And then use those insights to then figure out, okay, great, you dangle the keys, like that's the exciting thing, right? But then also trying to figure out like, okay, what's actually valuable for them.
Right. Well, thanks so much for sitting down and chatting. This was awesome. It's always great to spend time with you, and I'm excited to see the launch later this year.
Thanks, man.
Cool.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.